replicate the experience of being there in person, but it goes a long way. And finally, Zoom has some kind of primitive annotation capabilities, which are basically drawing with a mouse over the screen as it currently is, and then you can easily save these as screenshots and share them with the group afterwards. But we found this to be really effective in a kind of redlining way. I also I connected with friend and colleague Alvin Wong this week, who's a professor at University of Southern California in LA. And Alvin's been working in these modes even before this moment. And he shared some images of pinup from his studio at USC, where the whole group is kind of looking at a review of a process. And I also thought it would be worth sharing a totally different way of conducting a review, which Alvin hosted last spring in April, which was a review for a design seminar he was teaching at USC, which was done completely over Instagram, which I thought was a really interesting just kind of methodology where Alvin invited a group of architects and academics from around the world to follow a hashtag on Instagram, and over a 4 or 5 day period, people could comment on the posts that students were making of their own work. And it generated this quite lively discussion in the space of Instagram, which is an odd space. But you can see here where the student kind of explains their project, and then people from Los Angeles, Julia Kerner, people from Austria, Chris Precht, are responding, and the students were asked to kind of reply and try to have this dialogue over Instagram. So again, it doesn't kind of replicate the in-person experience, but we think that many of these platforms do offer some opportunities for engagement in different ways. And also the Instagram example is what we would call an asynchronous mode of teaching, where the work is put out there and by the students, and the critics respond over a certain period of time, but not necessarily in real time. Whereas the Zoom methods that we've been using in my studio right now are what we call synchronous, which require everyone to kind of be there at the same time. So I think a lot of conversations we've had, people are trying to kind of balance and negotiate how what contact is done synchronously and what contact can be done asynchronously. So I want to hand it over to Janette to talk about concept board.
Perhaps before we start with that, are there any questions specific to Zoom?
Hello, this is Mitra. I have a question. I'm wondering how you guys are solving the problem.
Complete introduction.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
This is Mitra. My question is, how are you guys solving the problem of not having access to students' access to software? Basically, some of the software that is needed for them when they are working remotely. How do you solve that problem?
That's a great question. We found that with Zoom, our institution actually has a license with it, so the faculty can set up meetings very easily with kind of no constraints on them. But there is a free license for Zoom that has some constraints, including a time limit for, I think it's 40 minutes, which can be an issue because it just kind of stops after 40 minutes. But on the student side, that hasn't been an issue for us because because our institution luckily has a license. But we know that and others might chime in here too, but there are other platforms that don't have time limits like that, including Google and I believe Microsoft, but I'm not sure because I haven't used that.
Mitra, are you talking about drawing software or Zoom specifically?
Yeah, I'm mostly concerned about drawing software. Any software that helps with 3D modeling. Let's say all of those Rhino and other software that typically students have been using.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is certainly a question that came up for us as well with a number of different software platforms. And we were probably not all directly involved in this, but we've learned so far that a lot of software manufacturers are offering special deals at this time, to allow for remote licenses and individual or temporary licenses. It really depends on what software we're talking about. But I think a lot of them are really stepping up in order to help students through this crisis.
Thank you.
I guess I'll also I know a lot of you can see the information in the chat. There's been a lot of good feedback there as well. And so Brett Snyder mentioned that a lot of schools have ways to log in remotely to access software. So that might be something you can look into, Mitra. And then I'm also seeing a question about the use of whiteboard for screen sharing mode. Adam, do you have any experience with that?
Let me add to that. Since I heard this remote access yesterday through our ACSA chat, I pursued it, and it seems like not all the schools' CAD labs or computer labs can function that way because it requires very powerful computer system, and not all of the schools are able to do that. So it's a great opportunity if it was possible. We will pursue that, but I'm not sure if it's doable in our school, for instance.
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, to the question about whiteboard, I have some experience using it. And the whiteboard basically is a kind of temporary white screen that pops up that allows you to annotate on a white background instead of on top of a model or a drawing that's on the screen. And then you can save those images as kind of iterations, or like sheets of trace would be the analog. So I think I haven't used it that much yet, but I anticipate that it will become part of the workflow.
I'm seeing a ton of really fantastic comments coming through. Do you, Adam and Antje, would you like to kind of pause and spend more time with them? Or do you think it's better to just kind of continue forward and then open up later?
I think we can maybe speak to a couple of different ones, 2 or 3. There's a great recommendation from Catherine to say that Zoom's being offered to educators for free in times of COVID. So this would be an example for anyone who has sort of concerns about access to software, to just check directly with the manufacturers about what they offer at this particular time.
Perfect. Great, and there's also a comment that relates to Mitra's question that Adobe Creative Cloud is also extending their free student licenses as well. Great, well, I'm going to move on to a second topic. So Adam talked more about Zoom and Instagram. I also started just a little Facebook chat with a number of you, and I'm seeing Cesar and Bart and Wendy, Bart Overley and Wendy Fong here as well. So a number of us have been chatting a bit about different software formats to use for reviews, for final reviews and other kinds of reviews. And I got a lot of feedback about the usefulness of concept board. So just to spark conversation here, what I did was I created a little mock-up in concept board, and in a moment I'll send you all a link to it. So you can all visit as well and see if it might be useful for you. I'm quite new to this myself, so I welcome any suggestions that all of you know about. But just to give you a quick introduction, I created a kind of mock-up here for drawing boards and sizes that students might use. And then to create an example, I just dropped in some drawings that one of my students did last year. So you can see how all of the drawings relate to each other kind of physically in a way that we might have in a review. And there are a number of interesting features that I've found so far. One is that I could zoom in on my own screen and actually have different controls than somebody else who's also logged into the same board. So even if I can zoom in here, somebody else might be able to kind of focus their attention somewhere else on the same page. There are also annotation features, so I could come in here and draw like something directly. I could leave post-it notes like this, or I could leave comments like this. They're quite small on here because the scale is so small. So the interaction's pretty simple. And one feature that I've enjoyed so far is that I can send a link to this to anybody and they can join on as a guest without needing to sign up or have an account of any kind. And then even as a guest, anybody can go ahead and make notes in the way that I've just shown. I've also found that, I myself am wondering, are you good?
Sorry, Janette, Mina has a question.
Oh, great.
Hi. So I'm looking at the concept board, and so you're saying that we can actually, it's kind of like the whiteboard for, I mean, that's not like the whiteboard, but you would actually load in concept board to the other ways of sharing your screen?
Oh, that's a really good question. I didn't mention that. So Concept Board is a separate platform than something like Zoom or any other kind of video conferencing software. It is possible to do video conferencing on Concept Board, but I believe you have to have a pro account to do that. So what I've been hearing from a lot of people is that they're using a combination of Zoom or any other software platform they currently have access to. At the same time that they're using Concept Board more as a site on which people can collect images. But does anybody else want to say more about that? Maybe you know more about that than I do.
So I'm just wondering if, like, because we're all thinking about our final reviews and we have multiple guests. If we're lucky, we can get multiple guests to call in and participate in reviewing the student work. So maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, I like the idea of the concept board for our portfolio stuff, but I'm like trying to keep it as simple as possible because I like the way it looks. I just need to find out more. Does anyone know anything more? Oh, they're offering free educational. Alvin said, similar to concept board. Okay, wait. Mural is similar to concept board, and Mural is offering free educational licenses.
Yes. Cesar Lopez, who's on the call, I think has been using concept board quite a bit. I don't know, Cesar, if you want to address some of these questions.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Cesar Lopez. Yeah, so I'll just kind of give a general overview of how we've been using concept board ourselves. So we've actually been trying quite a few different platforms over the last couple of weeks. And we tried Zoom. We also tried at some point Skype and Share. This was our second time. What you're seeing here on the screen is actually our second time trying concept board, which we used a combination of concept board for sharing work and Zoom for the phone calls. And this is kind of a combination just because we found it to be a little bit more stable. So this was fantastic because it allowed us to sort of have everyone's work pinned up all at once and allowed us to just mark up and continuously go through everyone's work and constantly reference things, as well as, if you go to the next slide, in some cases even post other work or post other references or links to case study projects, et cetera, et cetera. So this was amazing for us because it allowed us to first enable or continue our ability to draw and sketch and communicate in that way, but also record and save our work. So once the session was over, we were able to record the session or record the concept board, export it out as a PDF, and have it available to all the students to access it. But we were also able to lock the concept board in place so that way no further edits could be made on it. So this is kind of the major kind of advantage we found out of here is the ability to save the work and make sure that everyone's able to reference not just their own, but maybe another desk crit that might have taken place. The other major advantage, I think, which is a big plus that we're at least finding in all this, is that we're able to invite guest critics, even just for desk crits, regardless of geography. So this has kind of been our experience for the past couple of weeks.
Thanks, Cesar. And just so you all know, Cesar sent us some of his images beforehand. So what you're looking at here are snapshots from his use of concept board at Berkeley. Maybe what I'll do right now is I'd like to switch over to a slightly different format. And what we've done is we've created this Excel sheet on Google Drive or Google Spreadsheet that we can share with all of you. And Adam, could you place that link
Yes.
in the chat thing?
I will.
I guess I'm controlling your computer, aren't I? Do you want to take control back?
Yeah, I got it.
So what we did was we identified these 3 topics that you see in the purple and the blue and the teal. And we thought we could basically just take about 20 minutes per topic and follow the flow of conversation however it goes. So to begin with, we framed out this question of platforms. What software do you recommend? What do you use it for and how? And then secondly, media. What kinds of, have your students presented drawings, narratives, films, models, and perhaps other media? And how are you finding sort of success in that? The third topic deals more with sociability and review culture. How have you arranged critics and their relationships to students? How have you timed these interactions? And how have you also been able to kind of recapture some of the informal exchanges that happen at reviews? We would want to invite all of you to basically open up this this spreadsheet and contribute your own comments in the space below each heading. But of course, also please share them with us verbally as well, because that helps us kind of respond with each other. And then one more thing I wanted to point out is that under the black section under links, if you look at the concept board mockup, you can open that up and then access the same concept board that I just showed on screen. And you can just go ahead and draw on it or leave notes or just try it out however you want to. So I think that's everything we wanted to just sort of do to frame the conversation. So we're already seeing a lot of really great comments coming through. Can we perhaps start with the idea of platforms? What softwares are you recommending? Where do you think it's best to use each kind? Does someone want to start off with that? Perhaps people can go ahead and raise their hands in the participants panel to offer thoughts. Great,
Okay,
so Alvin.
Yeah. Alvin, do you want to start?
Sure. Hey guys. Good to see a lot of you on here. It's always, like I have to say, in the last few weeks or last week, it's actually really nice that every time I have one of these Zoom conferences just to see other people. Other than
So true.
So I think one of the things that has been interesting to really think about is actually the issue which you brought up here, which is culture, and thinking about how we kind of create a studio culture out of all of these platforms. Because I think we've got lots of individual things that do really precise sort of interactive things, but like the thing that I've found or I'm trying to use, I haven't figured out because we're not yet back from spring break, is trying to like tie them all together. And I think tying them, what I've been looking at is Slack, because I use it for my office. But basically Zoom, Miro, which is an equivalent version of the whiteboarding, Zoom, Google Drive, all of these things all tie in directly through Slack. And through Slack, we're able to do kind of a series of chat conversations, which start to feel, it's also the fact that now we're literally not going to have much interaction with our students that is not virtual. It's all going to be virtual. So instead of like lots of pieces of emails that are flying all over the place that are not connected at all, you have continuous conversations that are basically by themes. So you can put start a conversation that is specific to, let's say, we're just talking about physical models, and all the physical model conversations happen with this hashtag or with whatever hashtags. But all of these other platforms, whether it's Zoom or Whiteboard, whatever, all of these things all plug in, can be synced directly to Slack. So through Slack, you can actually update all of them and actually access all of them through Slack, which I've successfully done in the office, not necessarily in Studio. So now I'm attempting to run it through Studio. And that way it becomes something where we also have like channels which are, you know, just about fun things. Like I put up a channel which is show photos of your workspace. Right? Like I'm trying to create a studio culture.
Can I follow up with a question? Yeah, I don't know how many of you are struggling with the fact that some of your students are returning to China, and that there is a sort of constraint with, you know, the availability of certain software platforms in China. Elvin, do you know of any difficulties with Slack, the use of Slack?
I don't, but I'm sure there's problems. I mean, I have a very unique situation for me at USC, which I have an advanced graduate studio with 0 Chinese students. So that had never happened to me before, but yeah, this one time. With Chinese students, it seems like everything has to be WeChat. Yeah.
I see some good comments coming in that offer other platforms. I see Wendy recommending box.com, Teams as an education platform. So we're totally welcoming any other platforms that you have experiences with. Please add them. Okay, we have another question from Vahid. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, this is Vahid from WSU. I have some questions, 3 questions about concept board. First, so I'm looking at the website and it seems to be free, but you mentioned there is a pro version as well. Can you tell us what the differences are between the two? What are the abilities that one provides versus the other? The second question is if you could also share maybe a link to your concept board. You said we don't need the software to see something like a board, so we could kind of look at it. And my third question is if people, reviewers, for example, and students can zoom in and zoom out separately on boards, and when, for example, we have 20 students, 20 boards for each student, then how can you retain and know exactly what board a certain reviewer is looking at and make sure everyone is on the same page?
That's great. Maybe Cesar can answer this, or anyone else who has a lot of experience with concept board.
Yeah, I also saw Ribal had a lot of great comments about this as well. Maybe both of you can respond.
Rawal, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hi, this is Ribal. So there's a really good tool on concept board called Moderation. And if you click on that, then your mouse and everyone else who's logged on can join the moderation, and you can lead everyone with your mouse towards what you're looking at. They can, of course, leave the moderation and then zoom out, but they can always join back in and join to where you're looking and where you're zooming out.
Great. What about the difference between the pro version and the normal?
So for us, we've been using, just in terms of price, real quick, there is a 30-day trial for any one of the versions. We're currently using the premium version, and the difference between that and the basic version is essentially unlimited. We found unlimited upload size. So there's no necessary limit to the amount of uploads or the size of the upload. Also, the size limit to what can be saved out. And I believe the premium, Rabal, correct me if I'm wrong, but the premium also allows unlimited participants. So that's basically, those are the two variables that we found that made getting the premium version worth it, was unlimited participants and unlimited size.
Yeah, that's right. It's differences in how much you can store on the concept board and how many participants can join. But I think the free one has up to 20 participants.
Was there a third question that we might be missing?
If possible, if you have a link to maybe one of your past
right.
reviews, that would be nice to see how it works. And if not, it's fine.
Sure, I can share ours. It'll take me a second.
In the meantime, does anyone want to speak to some of the other platforms, your experiences with it, that are listed here or not yet listed here?
Can you, this is Mitra, can you explain a little bit? We have just started using Microsoft Teams. Can you explain a little bit about this, because we're totally new to it? What are your thoughts based on your experiences, any of you, related to this software?
I saw that June mentioned something about Teams. Would you like to speak to that?
Hi, I haven't, I've been using it with my colleagues, and it's very much like Slack. So it's a copycat kind of platform. So you can set up channels and subgroups of teams, and it has a chat-like function. So if you're at all familiar with the Slack environment, it's quite similar. And you can also then link it to your email or to your calendar. You can link to SharePoint files. So if you are working in the Microsoft Office environment, that can all be interconnected. So documents that you upload, web links, and so forth. So it's pretty similar.
I need to build a bed, but yes.
I see Jason's hand up.
Yes, hi. Just a quick question here. I'm looking at concept board. It looks great. I've been in the habit of using Mural, and just quickly, is there anyone who's tried using both and understands the benefits of one over the other? I know that Cesar mentioned some of the benefits, but I'm wondering if there's any comparison.
Anyone?
Well, I'll do some comparison and I'll share some notes out to everyone then.
I see that, Brett, you noticed that there's only 20 participants. Is there more for Mural, Jason?
I haven't had an opportunity to have 20 participants yet, so I'll look into that right now.
I wonder, it looks like there are a lot of notes, important notes about privacy concerns and FERPA, and how these platforms, relate to those regulations. And this is something that I do not have much knowledge of, and I'm wondering if there are any folks on the call that can actually speak to this. I don't know, Dora, you had a comment about that this came up with your university, if you have any insight, or anyone else.
Hi. Yeah, so I can really speak to this, the university. Hi all, who I haven't seen in forever, by the way. The Texas Tech University has pretty clear rules about what platforms we can use. And however, that doesn't mean that we can't go to them and say, hey, could we use concept board, or hey, could we use mural, in this case. But right now they've only allowed a couple of platforms at this time. And so they have concerns mostly that somehow, or I don't know, I have no idea exactly. It's like as if like, oh, we might end up teaching the public for free or something like that, as it seems to be the big concern. So, but they say it under security and privacy of the students, and they use FERPA as the kind of way of describing, what software platform can be used and what one can't. So, for example, we can't use Google for anything. I mean, that's considered non-secure transmission of information. And we can only use, Microsoft in relationship with our Office 365, and that has a really limited use on it. So I think it's important as we talk about this, it's like, oh, that platform sounds great, and that platform sounds great. I think I'm sitting here going, oh, I'd love to use Concept Board, but I know that I would, at this point, probably have to run to the university and ask for permission to it for using it.
Anyone else with knowledge on FERPA issues?
I'm going to add that I think that it's one of those things that you should be talking to your administrators and getting your administrators on board with whatever platform you need to use, and then let those administrators at least go, get the permission if that's the case, or at least, start the question with the institution, because I would hate for the students to be engaged in using a platform and then you switch platforms on them, right? And I think that would cause a lot of undue confusion, unfortunately for our students, which is I think part of a basic best practice is that we can't confuse them overly much.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point that we've also dealt with, to just make sure that the number of platforms that students get exposed to in this context, especially as a lot of them are transitioning to, like going home and moving and so on, that should be limited and, kind of kept consistent between, say, review formats or desk-grid formats or et cetera. The more minimal we can be, the better. I see a question from Sekou.
I was raising my hand to comment on Blackboard. I think it was because of FERPA, but Syracuse has given us a directive to only use Blackboard Collaborate for our classes. And I believe in the last information session that we had, they said something about it being accessible to portals in China. So that would be something that would work for us as well. And hi everyone that I didn't get to see in San Diego.
This is really great. I know there's a lot of comments still and questions in the comments. If it's something that you want us to address immediately, perhaps do it verbally, and otherwise we'll sort of try to get through this. Otherwise, we'd like to move on to the second category, slowly but surely. Okay, I don't see any more hands up for now. Janette, do you want to sort of lead us into that conversation? Or not? So
I just realized I'm muted. Sorry. Still getting used to this. So the media topic I put down here because I was hearing from a friend online that he felt like he had to actually change the way the work was being conveyed through an online review. That for him, it was much less about conventional boards and much more about using images as a kind of narrative. And it reminds me, for those of you who are familiar with the kind of paperless studio tradition at Columbia, it seemed quite similar to that. But just for starters, it seemed like it was important to this person that that there was more focus on kind of an immediate relationship with one image at a time, rather than the kind of side-by-side relationships between things. So I think that's perhaps one question that I'd love to hear from you all about, how you actually see the drawings best and how you present the drawings best, and whether you see any sort of interesting opportunities that fall into this new interface that we're all using. And I guess the same question also stands for 3D work, for models, for installation work or fabrication work, that I think is very challenging for an online media. So what have people learned about that?
I see Janette, is that how you pronounce your name? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the FERPA discussion a little bit. It's not really an issue about the platforms. Somebody else, that's not me. Okay, so I want to go back to the FERPA issue. It's not really about platforms or software. It's about all of these things becoming educational records now that we are fixing them in recordings and media, and inviting people who are not associated with the course, the instructor, the students, or the TA, to participate in reviewing these educational records. It doesn't matter what platform you're using. That's not the real issue. The issue is, do you treat these as educational records that are protected by privacy, and how much do you expose to the general public? And do you consider your thesis reviews a public process or a private process? Those are the kinds of things that we need to iron out.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for that. Luciana has a question.
Yes, hello everyone. So actually, I think it was more of a comment, because what I understood now from Janette King, it was a comment about physical models. Am I right, or am I missing something? I think it's just a quick comment that both I'm teaching at USC and the Otis College of Art and Design, and at USC and both schools, we are making the decision of not requesting physical models, unfortunately, because I'm a big advocate of how physical models is one of our main means of communication through concept. So, mainly because the students, and that was something, I had my first Zoom meeting with my students from USC last Friday, and they were mentioning how for them not being in studio, not having access to the tools or plotters will be much harder to think about making physical models. And at Otis it's slightly different, because some of the students, they don't have access to the software, and they use the computer lab. So I'm more concerned with that, about accessibility for those students of not even having minimal tools to work remotely. Actually, City Lab had a great report about that, how somehow we're gonna encounter this big issue of accessibility for many students not being able to have the right tools to work remotely, even internet access. So, so yeah, we are making the decision of not having physical models. There was a question, well, can we, for the ones who have 3D printers, can suddenly that become a 3D print request? But it's very unclear right now for our final reviews. But unfortunately, physical models, I think in this whole new platform that we are all learning how to deal with right now as studio design studio teachers, right? I think that's definitely going to be a whole new word. It's the learning curve for not just for the students, but I think for us as well.
I see a couple of more comments by Liz Martin about equipment and access to physical models, and June as well in the chat.
Hi, this is Liz. I just had a really quick comment that I teach at Kennesaw State, which is in Metro Atlanta, and we didn't really start till a few days ago, and it was very quick. We had 4 hours to get out, and we were told that we would just have 3 weeks, and then we would be able to return. And so I coordinate thesis, and it became very important that these students needed to graduate on time. And so we were able to get permission through the state through the Board of Regents that students can go in one by one, an hour at a time. They went back through the people who in the shop that run the shop to be able to let them in to move their stuff out. And now we've set up a process to be able to keep people who run the shop and the building and the plotters and those types of services employed. They came up with a scenario that was presented and approved that they can send things in for 3D printing. The advisor or the faculty approves it, and then the student is not allowed in the building, but they arrange a time, and then someone from the shop comes out and hands it out. And this includes laser printers and other things, so that although we're encouraging models and physical models, a lot of it will be done by hand, but there's also, they have to state a case that they would have to use fabrication equipment, but we're trying our best to have it so that it is available.
That's really great to hear. That's amazing. Mina, you've had your hand up.
Okay, actually I can speak on a couple of issues in regards to that. I was gonna mention first, so one of the principals of a firm actually suggested that I use Google Earth for site analysis, which I've been playing with, and it's actually quite cool. So what I'm recommending is, since a lot of the times the students are much more adept at playing with these new gadgets and tools and apps, that they explore some of these 3D, I guess, like, I don't know if it's, well, that's the one I've been playing with. I've already, like, I'm getting ready for my final project. So what I did was I went to Google Earth, and I have a site across the street from the Natural History Museum, and I went ahead and outlined the site for them to do research on the site. And obviously they can look up, it's not going to be the same thing as them mapping the information of the context, but at least they can look up contextual elements of temperature, climate, microclimates, topography, that kind of thing, using Google Earth, as well as some of the other research materials and tools. And then I reached out to Mia Lair to see if I can get a model. She gave me maps of the site, of the context that I had, and I'm wondering if she can give me a Revit model or some kind of model that I could actually build upon. So that's kind of what I'm doing for that. In regards to the physical models, this is a challenge, and you know, I think what we have to do at this point is just let them figure out whatever they are capable of making. Because I'm teaching engineering students. I have a very unusual studio, and it's like a first and second year studio combined. And so not only am I teaching drafting, contextual analysis, but I'm also introducing, you know, the primary foundational elements of design and such. And I'm finding, because I do have a lot of different kinds of students, with some of which are not as, they just don't have the equity. So maybe there are ways that they can start to talk to us about things that they think that they're capable of doing, because they can be very resourceful. Oh, and the other issue is what we've discovered, at least what I'm discovering at USC, is that a lot of them have gone home. So they don't have access to the wood shop anymore. Several of my students were using the laser cutters, and I don't know what they're capable of. So I'm going to be putting them into groups. So they're going to be doing a group project, and perhaps between doing it as a group project, they'll be able to navigate the sharing of the resources a little bit more.
Great. Sekou, and then Bart, and then Keith.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to hear that you know what Liz is able to do in metropolitan Atlanta. Unfortunately, in Syracuse, we don't have the same issue. Up until last week, part of the plan was that since my students are working in pairs, that at least one person in each group was going to be in Syracuse and the other one was going to be away. And so that person would have access to some of the shop facilities. But as of this week, everyone was sent home. So now no students have any access to any of the facilities, and all the facilities are completely closed for the rest of the semester. So that doesn't just affect our studio class, where we can kind of muddle through different forms of model making, like hand model making at home somehow, but the seminar classes, there are several seminar classes, mine included, where the seminar was literally about digital fabrication techniques. So they were just ramping up with their project on linking work with the laser cutters and 3D printers to then work with the wood shop and the CNC mill for their final presentation. And now I have to kind of rewrite the entire project, or the entire syllabus for the last 5-6 weeks of the semester. So I don't know if anybody else is coming up with similar situations or found workarounds for maybe specifically seminar classes that are digital fabrication intensive. It'd be nice to hear what others have come up with.
Sekou, I'm in a similar situation with my studio. It's not a seminar, but it's similar. It's focused on digital fabrication and also partnering with an external fabricator, a steel laser cutter in the Bay Area. And we're in the same situation as you guys at Syracuse, in that the building is closed, the shops are closed through the end of the semester, and a number of students are also leaving to go home. And with this week with the state kind of shelter in place order, the fabricators have all shut down as well. So there isn't even the alternative to go outside of the school. And so we're grappling with that too, although I'm fairly kind of optimistic about it, even so, in that we've decided to kind of focus the work essentially all on drawing, and specifically trying to explore some time-based approaches to drawing, whether those are short animations or GIFs to have the students kind of animate or think about how parts come together, which is not a substitute for kind of real tectonics, but is one way to grapple with it. So I'll let you know how it goes. I'm not sure yet.
There's quite a few more hands up. Bart, Keith, Yolanda, Wendy, and Jimenez.
Hi, everyone. Bart Overley from Ohio State. Similar to Syracuse, our entire campus is shut down. Faculty can't get into the facilities, and all the students have gone home. So for us, we've kind of made a decision that physical modeling it's an optional thing, but it's basically out for me. And I think that similar to the last comments, it gives us the ability to maybe look at some other modes of representation, like animation, that might have been thought of as kind of passé modes, and find new ways to break them. So, I think I'm sort of interested in the concept board mode of presentation, but wondering if it can accept some of these other types of non-drawing representations as part of a general layout of work, but we're going all digital, and the idea is that we're just pushing those forms of representation to try and get some new things out of things that we've kind of come to accept in very particular ways, I think.
Keith?
Hi, everyone. It's Keith from CCA. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm impressed to learn that there's still a way for students to use some of the tools at Kennesaw, but I bet that is going to be really short-lived. I think everyone is going to be going to shelter in place, and there just won't be people manning any machines anywhere on site, academic or not. And I just wanted to maybe just weigh in and suggest that we really need to, or I would suggest that it's necessary to temper our expectations and shift them a little bit. I think Adam's point about maybe shifting what they hoped was going to be a fabrication to time-based media, some other thing that can be used, and maybe the learning outcomes get nudged a little bit, but hold on to the core learning outcomes and maybe change the deliverables. And it's really hard when a course, I agree, Seiko, is like set up for production and fabrication. But recognize that at this point, most of our students are going to be in transit. If they haven't already been in transit, they're going to be home, they're going to be away from tools, they're going to be away from their classmates and colleagues. And so focus on how do we facilitate their learning, but more importantly, their continued excitement about their architectural education. I know it's something that everyone's been thinking about, but we struggled with it for the first week as our rollout was in drips. So over about 5 messages, we came to a total shutdown of the campus. We were all in that process trying to hold on, like, how can we continue to do this and continue to do this? And I think now we all recognize like our prime responsibility is to encourage the students and celebrate the work that they will be able to do in this environment over the next 2 months. And I hate to say it, we might need to be looking about how we continue to do this next year as well.
Good point. Yeah. Yolanda?
Hi, everyone. I guess I'm at USC, and in the studio that I'm teaching, we had 2 classes last week, and basically what I did was set up individual Zoom meetings with the students. So it's like a desk crit, and it worked out really well. I found it to be even more intimate than a desk crit, but with more distance. So it was this kind of interesting, intimate but distant thing. And we could share screens, draw in a rudimentary way on PDFs on the screen. And it was actually productive despite the fact that everything was really chaotic around us. So I found that to be really positive. Then we're gonna have our first review on Wednesday, and what I asked them to do is basically something like a paperless studio where they're going to kind of show slides. But I think I'll be looking at what everyone else has been saying about maybe showing, sharing the work beforehand with a critic or something like that. Also, it seems like it's a kind of interesting opportunity when you can invite people from all over to your reviews. The one thing is the time. So I've actually kind of shifted the time for the review so that it could be, so that people from, like, say, the East Coast could participate in it for the final. That's what I'm thinking of. And then also just to kind of chime in on the no models, like for many students, it just wasn't an economic possibility. But I've required pretty extensive drawings so that we're just really gonna focus on drawings and like tectonics of like the building through the drawings. So this is a really great forum. Just wanted
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds super interesting. And I just want to quickly insert one of the comments from the chat that seems really great, just mentioning the use of video, you know, as one way of sort of inserting kind of even like moving around models, etc., or using video in Instagram as another format for you know, presenting and engaging students sort of directly. We have 4 or 5 more hands up. Let's go through those, and then in the interest of time, move to the last topic of sociability and review culture, which will bring us back sort of really to the review format in particular. So Wendy, next.
Hi, everyone. This is Wendy Falk, dialing in from New York.
Yeah, so it's fairly interesting as we're getting a lot of progression on how the new school and Parsons is working, and we're literally closing the school for the rest of the semester. I think it's the same in tune with Harvard and Princeton. One of the largest things that has been useful in the past, because personally I've taught actually a lot of digital studios, so ironically this is nothing new. So it's actually even easier in a sense of saying, okay, great, now we don't physically have to meet at all. But one of the things that are very exciting about Zoom is, I don't know if most of you have used it, but breakout sessions are very useful. And if you make students read, setting up the teaching load on front loading polls is very useful to get the students engaged within discussion. At least I've been teaching for 5 semesters on a purely digital class for the Harvard Law School. It's a fun thing that I just do on the side. It's for the copyright class. And a lot of the cases it's a case-based class. So we require to engage the students, again, from different time zones. It's synchronous, but time zones are asynchronous. So it has been very useful, and we've learned a lot that if you front load the materials about half an hour before class, have them do readings, and then engage them with the polls during Zoom, and then do breakout sessions, no more than 4 to 5 people within these breakout sessions, it works really well. And then it's not trolling, but realistically it is, because then you peek into each breakout session and then you engage them further from dialogue. And then just to make sure that the Zoom breakout sessions are not more than, I would say, 15 minutes, and then the whole class disengaged, it's very useful to use those tools on Zoom. The other thing to kind of echo from that discussion that Alvin had earlier was engaging students on Slack. I've been integrating this for like 5 years or 4 years at Parsons now, and students are slowly picking up the idea of how do you engage that in studio. So we've been using it to kind of share day-to-day assignments, to share polls again, or if they have SurveyMonkey related stuff. That has been working really well. And on top of that, students have been able to use Slack to first upload their studio projects or seminar projects in a presentation format. So it'll be like InDesign deck or something, and have other people engage, such as outside reviewers. So last week we had, because we had to do everything online, I invited different colleagues from the industry. My class was a creative entrepreneurship class, so we engaged people from the beauty industry, fashion industry, and everything else to participate on the Zoom call as guest reviewers. And such as what we're doing here, it engages students outside of their respective sphere, but it also kind of allowed them to kind of see how an international workspace really incorporates in the studio atmosphere. So that worked out really well. Other insights that are great with Slack is using Box, because Box also, I know Canvas, a lot of schools are using Canvas and Blackboard. The issue is that some of the setup isn't the best for transparency of work. It's probably a FERPA issue on the other hand, but the work sharing is a little bit difficult. But on Box, it's pretty transparent. And I've been seeing a lot more students comment on each other's, pictures, if they do videos. And videos, I've been making my students do a lot of videos for the past few semesters. So videos are great if they're not very savvy with software, especially Premiere, or that's a little bit more like more heavy lifting. It's really easy for them to pick up other things like Keyshot for rendering, After Effects for video, and even if the worst comes to worst, they really don't know how to use anything, you could use iMovies to stitch together some like good kind of small effects and transitions. I'll be happy to share any of the videos that my students have put together. A lot of them are app-based, like city-based work. And another really great software to kind of engage students to use, which has been working pretty well, it's still in beta, is we've been testing for Adobe Project Arrow, which is the AR app So they've given our team, my private practice, like the license for that. And that's been really, students are really picking that up really quickly. So Project Arrow is something that you might want to explore. And the other one that we're also working on with is Adobe Xd. So Xd could then allow them to kind of drag and drop different kind of templates and like interface design on that, if that's useful. Yeah, Adobe Arrow. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. So I could type out some of the, can you add a digital trolling strategy? Yes, Molly, I will do that. Yeah, I have some.
And if you don't mind, add some of this also to the platforms, you know, for
sure,
the
I'll do that. I'll type out some of the stuff that worked well with design students.
Perfect. Thank you.
To answer Rebecca, no, Arrow is not, but I think you could request for advanced licensing. But if you need, I could put you in touch with the very, very small Arrow team that I've been working with on developing their software.
Great. Manus?
Hey everybody, good to see everyone. It was so fun. Really fun to see everybody in this platform. You know, responding to the model question, I've so far had a chance to say sit on a couple of reviews. I think one of the interesting things about our education has always been that, you know, studio environment, we don't really have final reviews. We've always had this kind of theatrical performance, this type of, you know, live theater aspect of it. And, you know, for those who's ever, you know, been on reviews where had students say to each other, oh, I'll definitely come to your review, or maybe you can take some photographs. There's the nature of documentation of the review format in itself has always been really difficult. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there might be a silver lining in all of this. It's sort of pressing a new demand for the documentability, if that's even a word, you know, whether or not the photography or videography of something that we construct physically to be thought through a little more seriously. So that's one thing that I would say, you know, like if we're going to take photos, maybe we really need to turn on the design lens and think about what these photos mean or what these videos mean. Other silver linings that I want to, you know, maybe highlight, which Yolanda already alluded to. I was on a review and somebody had a Spanish person sitting on a review from Spain for a Californian, you know, for a Californian project, for a Californian school, which is kind of crazy. I mean, I think the idea of flying someone in the future will probably be dismantled by this entire process, maybe. But I mean, so for better or for worse, this is kind of exciting. It's a silver lining that I definitely want to underscore. And maybe one last silver lining that I want to present for all of your considerations. You know, I don't know what type of environments. I mean, you guys probably have been to review spaces that are anywhere between 300 square feet to 8,000. I don't know. The size of the review format is sometimes really large, so large that, you know, those of us who can't really project our voices, our thoughts are just lost into the sea of white noise of the space. But what I noticed this time, I was just on Neil Denari's review, and, you know, I'm pretty familiar with some of his students, one of whom never listens. I know this person really well. He used to. It turns out that he just couldn't hear. And this time, you know, it's just him being totally plugged in. I guess he was reporting back for the first time. It was entirely clear. It was abundantly clear what the critics were saying. And so I think that's a silver lining that's worth also highlighting. You know, maybe with the loss of certain theatricality, we're gaining something else.
That's really amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I know there's still a few more hands up. We do want to make sure we get to the third category here, specifically because I think it touches on, you know, beyond sort of the classroom situation, it touches on the kind of informal aspects that final reviews have in most schools. You know, in that you're not just sort of talking to the jury of critics, etc., but you also have the chance kind of as a student and a faculty member to listen in on other conversations that happen. So I would invite anyone who has sort of experiences or ideas to share about like how we might sort of drop in, or how students might drop in informally in these various platforms. That would be really great. And then in the interest of time, I would love to leave a little bit of time at the end, for open questions. I see there's a few coming in the chat, and also we have a second tab on the spreadsheet that you're all seeing, which invites you all, if you're willing, to sort of be a critic from afar in someone else's review, on any one of these formats, to please sort of sign up. That would be really great. So yeah, I invite any thoughts on kind of the social learning, informal learning, etc. Of in review. Jimenez, did you want to say more? Your hand is still up.
Yeah, sorry. I have been
Sorry,
working
I'm
with
good.
this-
Yeah, no.
who are you talking, or am I talking? Sorry.
Go ahead, Mina. You're fine.
So as much as I'm really excited about these new technologies that we're using, and I'm celebrating it completely, I'm also a filmmaker, and I'm traveling. I mean, let's just get to the point. Doesn't matter. You guys, some of you know me. There's an issue right now, especially that we're handling, that we are in a dangerous position for our profession if we get too caught up in these technological image and representation without recognizing that each time we are celebrating these things, we need to emphasize back to the students that what we are doing has to do with the corporeal form, space, and order that we live in our bodies. And as seductive and fun as this stuff is, it does not contribute to human psychological health. There's a reification and alienation of not connecting back to our bodies that we are definitely going to be missing out on. And I'm now a faculty fellow for the Center on Public Diplomacy, and I am working with the State Department because of this problem of real versus fake. And it's an issue that I don't want us to get so caught up in it, and we have to remind the students that they're going to be suffering, because when we touch the stuff, there's a connection that cannot be engaged and replaced. So as much as I love it as a filmmaker, I love it, I also feel like I have to say this. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Jay Bonder, sorry to not know your first name.
Oh, is he unmuting himself?
Julian.
Okay, Julian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for this great session and great comments. I just want to, perhaps it's a way to connect to the question of sociability and review culture that, Antje, you were talking about. I want to follow up a little bit on what Keith mentioned about tempering expectations and the idea of sustaining, the kind of excitement that we try to instill in our students, on a personal level. I mean, I had this afternoon, all afternoon, kind of a digital conversation with all my studio group. And obviously it was the first time, since our break, to do so. And I saw lots of very moved human beings by the fact that everybody's isolated and is very distant from each other. And I think, Mina, what you mentioned is very significant, because this is going to affect, the morale, the psychology, the emotional response to what we do, not only on us, but basically on younger colleagues, as I always like to call them, that have not been faced with this kind of dramatic change of conditions, as we have never been exposed to this kinds of change of conditions. So I want to bring this to our attention, not only to say temper expectations, but actually to set new kinds of expectations. And I take, Jimenez Lai's, comments very well, because, one of the things that we are going to have to somehow go back is to that connection between mind and hand, and I think the kind of instilling in them, the desire to go back to some sketching, hand sketching, because they don't have, maybe they have the computers, but they don't have printers, they don't have 3D printers, they don't have all of those tools that we normally see them engaging with. Perhaps I ask all my students to try to sketch 3 or 4 sketches a day. And suddenly in a week, they will have 24 sketches, and they will see themselves, back into something that has a deep root in our own discipline, but also deep meaning to them, as creative human beings. That's one aspect. The second aspect that was quite interesting today is that while we had a group conversation, I also had individual conversations with each of them, for like 15 minutes or so, but all of them were invited to stay in the group conversation. And many of them said that while they were working, it was very reassuring to see that kind of critique or that comments or a series of supportive comments on their projects that we can offer. So it was interesting to see that the community that we all now feel in this group conversation is quite significant. We know that from studio, but I think we have to find ways to sustain that through this next 2 months or more, as Keith suggested, that may happen. So those are 2 comments. And the last one is that perhaps it's an homage to Gregotti, who passed away last week, connected to this story, where he told us that architecture needs freedom of thought, not freedom of conditions. And now we're facing conditions that we have never expected. So I ask my students to really significantly consider themselves as creative human beings, where they are free to think, and they're not trapped in 4 rooms or in a room inside 4 walls. So I think we can bring to them more material than the kind of applications and all the kind of experience that we have, but also bring to them some readings, bring to them some things that reassures them about what Mina described, just before. I think would be very important for all of us to try to do that. Thank you.
Super important. Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Julian. Keith?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This is really incredible, and I'm sorry that I jumped in half an hour late, because I'm sure I missed some really great observations. There's so many things that I think we're all trying to hold on to in this moment, both like recognize the silver linings. I really appreciate Jimenez's point, but Mina's point about like not giving up, core strengths in the way that we work and see the world and bring ideas to the world. I'm really, Mina's point makes me think that like when we all come back together with our students, we probably will all be thinking very differently about how we communicate, what's important to teach, what maybe we had been teaching that we recognize was not as significant as we might have thought it to be before all this happened. So I'm a little bit less concerned about in the moment losing some of the tangibility of what we do, and maybe taking the silver lining about recognizing how central communication is to what we do, and how central conversation and dialogue is. I've been watching the chat box, which is also full of really amazing insights. Dora talked about reviews not just as direct critiques of any individual student's work, but really a conversation among students and faculty. And I really like Jimenez's observation that in fact students might be able to participate more effectively now than they have been before, because we all know that in most reviews the faculty face the work and the students face the back of the faculty and the back of the critics. So the notion that we also have the possibility to bring in voices that none of us could have done before, except for the handful that we were able to fly in at any given moment based upon our individual budgets and resources, that's pretty exciting to me as well. So I just want to see this one thing we might do, as well as volunteering to be available as critics. I think we have to maybe go a little bit further and share our schedules, so that we can actually see when all of our schools are reviewing, figure out within the restrictions we have from FERPA and other things, how open our reviews can be to outside eyes, if not necessarily outside voices, but to collectively find some way to curate a larger national review rather than individual isolated reviews, which we typically have. You know, we're all only capable of maybe sitting on 2 or 3 reviews in any season, fall or spring. We might be able to see more work and be more enthusiastic, more excited about what's happening in our world. So there's that. And our students can maybe see opening each other's reviews to each other's students, I think could be pretty exciting too. And then finally, how do we make sure that we celebrate the work of all of these amazing students that we all teach? And I don't know whether it would be perhaps through ACSA or some partnership, ACSA and AIAS and NCARB. Can we produce a kind of national platform or an international platform where we can share, our students can put up their work, there can be an audience for it, because they're all gonna, we know they're disappointed that they're not gonna be able to install work in a physical space in front of their classmates. And so we can grow that community in this moment, I think, in ways that could be really productive.
We're adding a column on the sign up sheet in the same spreadsheet, you know, for people to indicate their final review times. So we can hopefully at least take the first steps, you know, towards what Keith is suggesting in this meeting. Janette, do you want to go next?
Yeah, you know, we are on the verge of making these reviews massively public. Have we stopped and asked our students if they're accepting of this? We're taking them for granted. I know I come from a school that's in the upper Midwest, and it's going to be traumatic for some of these students to be placed in such a massive public display and public review.
That's a good point. Alvin, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey. Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to build off some of the previous points about talking about community. I just posted a couple links on the chat, but one of the things we're doing at USC is expanding our public programming online. So we have 2 upcoming events featuring some of the people on this chat as well that are going online as virtual webinars now. And I think one of the things we've seen is that it's really expanded the reach of our discussions that normally would happen within the 4 walls of our lecture hall and the couple hundred people that would come to our lectures. But now within literally 48 hours of announcing the first one, we've already got 200 people registered from all over the world. And it's been really surprising to see, because we've made people state their affiliation. A significant number of them have no affiliation with the school whatsoever. And I think right now we're at a moment where, let's say, we are all sort of craving these contacts with the outside world, and we have an ability to foster discussions and create discussions that can connect, just the way we were talking about the final reviews. Now you can get jurors that come from all over. Like the attendance you can probably get for a lecture now or a conversation is really, really something very, very different than it used to be. And I think one of the things now is we have a new design problem in front of us, which is how do we design this culture that we are all now being forced to live in, right? Because it's a culture that didn't exist before, right? But we happen to be in a moment where all the tools are there for us to leverage to do it. I mean, even if this had happened 10 years ago, like, we would not be able to do half the things we can do now. So there's a really, really empowering moment we're experiencing right now, which is, okay, empowering in a very particular way. Like there's obviously a lot, like that Mina was talking about, the things that we're losing. But the fact is we have to deal with it, right? Like this is one of the few times in history where my wife and I have having this conversation before, where normally when things happen in the world, it's like, oh my gosh, can you believe that happened to them? Like there's this one group where it happened. Now it's literally everybody on the planet at the same time. So it's a very unique condition, but I think one that we have the opportunity to shape.
Yeah, great point. Vahid?
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of follow up on this. While it is very empowering, and all of these workshops have been very interesting, and I really enjoyed this. At the same time, I think it can't replace our studio environment, and I think it's a fortunate thing, and I'm pretty happy about it, that although we have all these amazing tools and gadgets, still it can't replace the studio environment. I think it means that our form of education brings a lot of value that cannot be easily replaced by, online education in the future.
Great. We don't see any more hands up, and this is actually sort of perfect timing for all of us. We're about at the end of the session. I want to just ask for any final statements, comments, etc. And most of all, really thank all of you for sharing your amazing insights and sharing with us in the spreadsheet a number of experiences that you've all had. And we really hope to see you all in some form at some virtual review soon. Jason?
Thanks, Antje. First off, thank you to the team for organizing this. This is amazing. I mean, hearing from everyone and then also just chatting with a number of you has been really fantastic. I just wanted to follow up. Someone had asked about Mural and how many users could be in Mural at the same time. And they actually got back to me on chat while we were having the call and said it's unlimited. They recommend 25 as a limit, but they've said they've seen people with sessions going up to 100. And so I placed that in your spreadsheet as well.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thanks
Jason.
again.
Yeah. June, Grant? You might need to unmute yourself.
You're absolutely right. I had to unmute. Janet, thank you for inviting me. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I'm not teaching this semester, but I've been doing online mid-reviews for some time. So I was intrigued. There was almost a sense of coming to a funeral, recognizing the end of the old studio format. And I have to tell you, I have been waiting for this moment. I am not a fan of the final review process. I think it is a theatrical performance, and I question the value to the students. And so I have been at USF, been hosting online reviews for some time. I'm excited by what Alvin's doing with Instagram, and I really encourage this group to embrace this moment. I feel your pain around the studio format and the camaraderie that exists within studio. I remember it well, but I also remember feeling like an outsider within the studio format. It is not homogenous. We did not all feel the same embrace. And so I want to encourage you all to think of this as a truly democratic moment to craft the new future. And Mina, I hear you about the, what are we losing about touch? I have to tell you, we are in a new future, and that physical touch that we talk about in touch of touching the physical model, it simply means that we have to now script exactly what we want to see from our students. And that's what I do with my students. I tell them what I want to see. If they're going to give me a digital presentation, they have to produce the same things that someone does in the physical model. If they're going to give me a movie, I want to see that section. I want to get a close-up. I want to see it full screen, all the details. So now the job is on our side to script what we want to see, what the students should be producing at the end of the year, so that the reviewers are coming to a fully developed project, and not sometimes it's kind of hit or miss. We have to admit that. But it is a new beginning, and so we have to embrace it. And so I really encourage this group, USF, CCA, and I'm glad to see Wendy in New York and Sekou, to really truly embrace this, that yes, we may not be able to go to a digital fab lab, but embrace animation, embrace movies, embrace iMovies, embrace all the free technologies that are out there that are meant to communicate information, because at the end of the day, it's about communicating. It is not about the physical model, but it's about communicating the information. So I'm really excited by the dialogue that you guys have had. It's a privilege to have listened in. And Janet, thank you for hosting and organizing and reaching out to me about what I've been doing at USF, because as a minority, I have not been a fan of the studio process.
It's
Those are my
such a
comments.
great point. Yeah, such a great point. Thank you, June. Seku and Julian, and then we have to jump off, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think this might echo a few things that happened before. I'm really in awe of this moment. And as much as I've hated not being able to travel and see everybody in person, this is a real amazing point for us to reflect on the things that have worked and haven't worked. As much as we're excited about our opportunity to engage in all of these digital cultures and script a new future for what the design review might look like, I think my prediction is that we're gonna have a greater understanding and appreciation for the physical and the physical touch, the physical communication, simple gestures like shaking hands and giving a hug. We're gonna really, really remember and cherish those times where we get to gather in person physically much more.
Totally. Thank you.
I
Julian.
just want to second, what Seku just said, and basically simply add that in these moments that we are faced with conditions that are extremely complex, for us and for the world, we may perhaps go not back, but go forward with a sense of what's important, what matters, and what matters obviously depends on each of us, and what matters is what we communicate to our students, and what matters is what they get from what we are trying to instill in them. So hopefully these times will make us center our attention and be more clear about what really matters, in terms of transformation of the world as we see it, as we know it. And there are many things to be done. And as architects, we can do lots of things, but in these moments that we're guarded or we're sequestered in our own, environments, let's consider the plight of so many that do not have the privilege that we may have, by teaching or by being students or by participating on this academic life. So let's consider these next 2 months as almost like a real trial on our own selves. Where do we want to be? And I want to thank Antje and Janette and all the organizers for this fantastic meeting. Thank you.
And thank you, Julian, for these perfect final words. So thanks again to everyone attending, and we're super grateful for all the input and feedback, and hopefully see you in some form very soon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Antje. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Mike, for giving us the platform.
Antje or Adam,
Thank you. Yes.
can you save the chat and maybe
We will.
share it with everyone? Okay.
Yes, and this is all recorded as well. So
fantastic.
We'll work with Mike and ACSA to
Awesome job. I think we can maybe for like our many colleagues who were not here, I think I can commit someone on our staff to do a Google form, maybe where we could collect information about people's reviews and whether they're willing to serve as a virtual critic for other people, to maybe build this out. And Michael, Monty, maybe we can work with ACSA on that. And I think building out, maybe even on the ACSA site, if we could all look and see when the schools are having their reviews, so we just have a sense, because it's really like a 2-month period, given all our various term schedules.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye. Stay safe.
Oh, amen.
How do I hang up? I have to try to leave meeting.
kind of fun to watch this process of people flickering
I
in and
know.
out.
Definitely.
Oh, wait, the Google Docs should have like an email part, right?
Yeah, second tab,
Okay.
please.
No, I put my information, but I didn't put my email.
That would be great.
Okay, let me see. Sign up. Here. Emails.
Sure, people.
Oh, text should be.
Yeah, Adam, I'll save the chat right now.
Great. Me too.
It never hurts to both
More
do
of a
it.
backup.
Yeah.
Okay. I just added an email.
Perfect. Thank you, Nina.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
That's great. I think I'm just going to end this, Janette.
Okay, cool. See you soon.
See you soon. Thanks.